You know that feeling when you finish Hollow Knight and you're left with that existential void, wanting another game that grips you in the same way? Well, relax, because today I'm going to show you 10 games that will fill that hole in your gamer heart. Each one brings that feeling of discovery, mysterious atmosphere, and precise combat that every Hollow Knight fan loves. So get ready, because there are many hidden gems on this list. Salt and Sanctuary is one of those games that any Hollow Knight fan simply needs to know, especially if you enjoy challenges with a darker and more complex feel. Unlike the fluidity and beauty of Hollow Knight, Salt and Sanctuary brings a very strong mix between the Metroidvania style and the brutality of Soulsborne games. The combat is intense, with many options for weapons, spells, and fighting styles, which makes you feel truly forged in the difficulty that each enemy and boss imposes. It's not just a difficult game, it's the kind of difficulty that keeps you testing your skills and learning from each defeat, which reminds me a lot of what I felt in Dark Souls, only ensued. The atmosphere is extremely dense and dark, with that hand-drawn look that gives it a unique artistic touch. The atmosphere, charged with mystery and desolation, creates a perfect setting to explore a world that is both vast and interconnected, in the classic Metroidvania style, but with a gothic and disturbing feel. The absence of a map, for example, forces us to memorize every stretch, every trap and shortcut, making exploration as challenging as combat. I confess that this journey brought me a lot of nostalgia for the old games, but with a modernity and complexity that only a well-made indie can provide. As for progression, Salt and Sanctuary uses a skill system that resembles the upgrades of Metroidvanias, where you unlock new movements like wall jumping and air dashing to access areas that were previously blocked. This keeps the game dynamic and always intriguing, because you know that the area that seems insurmountable can now be overcome with the right skill. I also love the fact that the game has multiple classes and a robust customization system, which allows you to build your character in a very personal way, whether focusing more on brute strength, magic, or an agile and technical gameplay. The story, without being the main focus, has an interesting backdrop that involves kings, gods, and a curse that permeates the entire island on which the game takes place. I liked the way the narrative is revealed through encounters with mysterious NPCs, dark revelations, and choices that affect the end of the game. Don't expect linearity or explicit exposition. It's a story to be unraveled with patience and observation, like a dark puzzle that is assembled in the lines of gameplay and scenery. Comparing with Hollow Knight, while the Team Cherry title focuses more on platforming with an almost poetic exploration and a deep and poetic mythology, Salt and Sanctuary is a more explicit invitation to torment, with tense combat and a lot of you-knew-how-to-die feedback that makes you rethink every step. I would say that Salt and Sanctuary is for those who want a Metroidvania with a soul's soul, where technique and strategy in combat are crucial. It's a game that doesn't forgive mistakes and rewards you very well when you learn its mechanics. I can say that Salt and Sanctuary maintains that addictive vibe that makes us want to keep trying even after several defeats, no matter how frustrating it is. It manages to be a great representative of challenging games with a darker and more brutal feel, but that pleases both Metroidvania fans and those who love the Soulsborne franchise. If you enjoy Hollow Knight for its depth and exploration, Salt and Sanctuary will win you over with its strategic difficulty and unique atmosphere, bringing hours and hours of challenge and satisfaction in the right measure. Definitely, it's a title for those who don't give up a good dose of suffering in the name of victory. Haiku. The Robot is that Metroidvania game that, if you loved Hollow Knight, you will enjoy a lot, even though it has a slightly different approach. Instead of the visual worked on the organic and dark aesthetic of Hollow Knight, Haiku bets on a simpler but charming pixel art style, set in a robotized post-apocalyptic world where you control Haiku, a small robot awakening to a mission to save the city of Arcadia from a virus that corrupts its machines. The atmosphere is somewhat melancholic and full of a mystery in the lines that reminded me of that pleasant feeling of wanting to unravel everything behind the plot, even in its simplicity. In gameplay, Haiku brings classic Metroidvania elements: jumps, new skills that unlock areas, and exploration of maps full of secrets, but with a more basic and accessible combat than what we find in Hollow Knight. You will deal with enemies that are viruses infecting machines, and the healing system is very interesting. You can transform collected parts into life by holding a button, which creates a risk and reward dynamic that kept me hooked for hours. The game is not as punitive as Hollow Knight, so it is a more friendly experience for those who want to explore without so much pressure, but still challenging in some points. The world of Arcadia is vibrant in its simplicity, full of very different places and full of robotic NPCs with curious and often enigmatic dialogues, which adds a layer of narrative that unfolds slowly as you advance. The setting conveys the idea of a robotic civilization trying to understand its own dilemmas in a scenario of destruction, which left me intrigued and motivated to explore every corner, trying to discover more of the story and the universe. Despite the lighter environment compared to the dark density of Hollow Knight, still the accent of loneliness and mystery is very present. The issue of progression is something that's shown for me in Haiku. The game has a learning curve that fits new skills at the right time, making you feel rewarded at every step. Skills like double jump, transforming into a ball to roll, and using a hook provide an agile and fun gameplay, even if it doesn't reinvent the wheel. The fact that the game is simpler does not diminish its quality. On the contrary, it hits the balance between being an accessible Metroidvania and having those elements that fans of the genre value, ensuring that satisfaction of opening a new door or accessing an unknown area. If we compare with Hollow Knight, Haiku the Robot is a lighter, less complex version, but still quite competent as a Metroidvania. While Hollow Knight is full of demanding combat, precise platforms, and a deeper and more symbolic narrative, Haiku offers an uncomplicated experience, with very responsive controls and a more relaxed vibe. A good choice for those who want the feeling of exploring and facing challenges without the extreme pressure. In addition, Haiku brings a difficult mode, which even gives one-hit kill lives, for players who seek an extra layer of challenge. I see Haiku the Robot as a cute, functional Metroidvania that offers an honest adventure for those who love to explore worlds and unlock skills, but who don't want to exhaust themselves in very complex mechanics or extreme difficulties. It's that title that breaks a perfect branch after or between heavier games in the Hollow Knight style, with a friendly look and a well-balanced gameplay. If you are looking for an experience that brings you the pleasure of exploration with a hint of challenge without giving up a more relaxed pace, Haiku the Robot is a sure recommendation for your list. Islets is that type of Metroidvania that immediately catches the eye for its beautiful and charming look, with hand-drawn features that even resemble Studio Ghibli animations. You control Aiko, a brave little mouse who pilots an old plane on an adventure to reunite floating islands and restore the world. The setting is full of life and colors, an interesting contrast for those who were used to the darker and more melancholic feel of Hollow Knight. It's like a friendly Metroidvania, but without losing the essence of the genre and the pleasure of exploration. In gameplay, Islets is balanced and accessible, with responsive controls, a standard combat system for the genre: jump, dodge, sword, and bow attacks. But that offers a series of cool challenges in platforming and combat. The progression is very satisfying, with upgrades and skills that are unlocked as you advance. And the differential is the fact that the 5 islands are practically independent maps that, as you advance, are connected by bridges, creating a larger and more complex map. This structure facilitates immersion and does not overload the player with exaggerated options in giant maps right from the start. The narrative, despite being simple, has a very welcoming and hopeful vibe, something that caught me right after games with heavier themes. The story of reconstruction and connection that Islets proposes is revealed with subtlety through the characters that populate the world, each with their small dilemmas and striking personalities. This creates a sense of community within the game and brings a feeling that the world is alive, which made my experience closer and more enjoyable. Islets also stands out for its platform design, which is fluid and intelligent, without the annoying sections with flying enemies or unfair obstacles common in many Metroidvanias. I was getting a taste for skills like the bow with special arrows that allows you to teleport or walk in the air, which give a cool dynamic to the game and allow creative movements during exploration and combat. The game requires timing and precision, but in a way that doesn't frustrate, being something fun and intuitive for those who already enjoy the genre. When I compare it with Hollow Knight, Islets seems to me a game that occupies a complementary space. It doesn't try to be more complex or dark, but offers a calm, charismatic experience built to be appreciated without haste. While Hollow Knight throws you into an obscure narrative and a challenge that can be brutal, Islets invites you to a light adventure, with challenging combat in the right measure and a more colorful and friendly world. I think it's an excellent choice for those who want something in the Metroidvania style, but with less tension and more focus on quiet exploration and connection with the characters. Islets won me over for this charming simplicity and its classic essence of well-made Metroidvania, with all the elements we expect from the genre. Satisfying exploration, cool upgrades, challenging bosses, and a world that gradually comes together, like the islands themselves in the game. If you are looking for a Metroidvania that offers you a warm and relaxing experience after more challenging sessions of Hollow Knight, you should definitely give Islets a chance. It's a game that made me want to go back to its journey several times just to enjoy the visuals and the small details of this adventure through the floating islands. Biomorph is a Metroidvania that immediately draws attention for its transformation mechanic, which is a bit like what Kirby does, but with a darker and heavier touch, also bringing several influences from Hollow Knight, especially in the exploration and design of the world. In the game, you control Harlow, who wakes up on an alien ship and discovers that he can transform into the enemies he defeats, absorbing their abilities to advance. This idea is incredibly creative and refreshing, making the progression much more dynamic and strategic, and that made me dive in head first from the beginning. The hand-drawn art is another strong point, with a style that mixes a vibe of 2000s cartoons with a gothic and mysterious touch that reminded me of the dense atmosphere of Hollow Knight. Each region of Blightmoor, the world of the game, is detailed and full of personality, and the setting contributes to that climate of desolation and mystery typical of the best Metroidvanias. In addition, the animations are surprisingly fluid for an indie game, which makes combat and movement very enjoyable, making me feel almost as if I were in an interactive cartoon. Speaking of combat, Biomorph delivers an experience that mixes accessibility and challenge with heavy blows and impacts that have a good weight in combat. The Souls-like system appears in the structure of dying and returning to the last save point, in addition to the need to recover your belongings as in Dark Souls, which adds tension and emotion to the matches. It's a game where learning the pattern of enemies and using the acquired skills intelligently is essential, and this creates an experience that kept me attentive and satisfied whenever I managed to overcome a challenge. The progression is well balanced and interesting due to its central biomorphosis mechanic. As you defeat more enemies, you can unlock the ability to transform into them at any time, which opens up a huge range of possibilities for exploration and combat. Each form brings specific advantages, such as crossing obstacles or attacking differently, and I felt constantly encouraged to experiment with new approaches to overcome barriers and enemies, which gave a depth that I didn't expect to find in an indie Metroidvania. The narrative is somewhat enigmatic, focusing on Harlow's journey to restore the spaceship and unravel his past. Although the story is not the strongest point of the game, the dialogues and animated cutscenes help to create a very cool immersion, making you want to understand more about the universe and the mysteries behind the devastated alien civilization. It's a backdrop that works well for the rhythm of the game, without weighing too much and allowing the focus to remain on gameplay and exploration. Comparing with Hollow Knight, Biomorph brings a different experience, lighter in the visual and more focused on a creative transformation mechanic that gives you freedom to experiment. It embraces the challenge and complexity in combat, but with a more vibrant and less dark tone, which makes it a great alternative for those who enjoy Metroidvanias that mix style, innovation, and adventure in a polished and content-filled package. Biomorph won me over for the balance between innovation, style, and challenge, and it's a title that Hollow Knight fans should certainly experience. Bow Path of the Teal Lotus is a very interesting Metroidvania for those who love Hollow Knight, but it also manages to assert itself with its own identity. The game puts you in the shoes of Bow, a Tentahana fox, on a journey that mixes Japanese folklore with stunning handmade 2.5D art. When playing, what caught my attention the most was the feeling of fluidity in the movements and combat, which involves a lot of the use of Bow's staff, with attacks in various directions and aerial mechanics that simulate a ballet of acrobatics, which makes each combat very dynamic and fun. One of the highlights for me was the traversal system, which encourages you to move with agility and creativity using a combination of dash, grappling hook, and air attacks that make you feel the weight and precision of each movement. This creates that addictive feeling of wanting to master the character to glide through the scenery with mastery, something that makes exploration almost an extra challenge beyond the combats. Each area of the game is full of details and inspirations and elements of Japanese folklore, which brings a rich and unique atmosphere, a visual that made me stop to admire more than once. However, despite its beauty and refined mechanics, Bow suffers a bit with some parts that break this rhythm, such as more linear phases that constrict the freedom of exploration and fights against bosses that can be too long, requiring patience. Although the difficulty is present, the game is not frustrating, but challenging, especially for requiring precision and timing, which kept me hooked. The system of equipable Daruma dolls, which give special abilities and can be charged for even more powerful attacks, adds a layer of depth and strategy to the battles. The story is delivered more directly than in Hollow Knight, with characters who already know you and guide you on your mission, which may make the plot less mysterious, but helps to give a clearer purpose to the adventure. I liked this touch, as it creates an interesting connection with the world and the NPCs, and the theme of the journey is wrapped in reflection on life, fleeting beauty, and destiny, themes that give emotional weight in the right measure for the game. Comparing directly with Hollow Knight, Bow has its most obvious inspirations in combat, movement, and atmospheric design, but manages to stand out for its more colorful and fluid approach, elements that bring a freshness and a personality of its own. If you like the Metroidvania style with challenge but want something with a more vibrant visual and a combat that requires technique and strategy, Bow is a sure bet, despite some occasional stumbles in the level design and rhythm. Bow Path of the Teal, Lotus is an experience that will certainly please those looking for a beautiful, challenging, and fluid Metroidvania with a unique cultural touch that differentiates it in the genre. It left me with that pleasant feeling of having explored a living world full of details, while having fun facing enemies and mastering a character that responds exactly as I wanted. If Hollow Knight had an impact on you, Bow is a title that deserves a special place on your list. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is a Metroidvania that surprised a lot. The game brings all the fluidity and challenge characteristic of the Prince of Persia series, with a touch of modern Metroidvania. You control Sargon, a young warrior who needs to explore the legendary Mount Kof to rescue the missing prince and face enemies that require both speed and strategy. The gameplay is a show in itself, with precise movements, a combat system that rewards you for timing and agility, and abilities that you unlock as you advance, which makes exploration as engaging as the confrontations. Visually, the game is a spectacle. The 2.5D environment is rich in details, with golden palaces, mysterious forests, and underground cities that seem alive and full of stories to tell. I was impressed with how much each region has its own personality, and how the map design encourages intelligent backtracking, typical of the Metroidvania genre. The transitions between areas are smooth, and there is always that feeling of unraveling a vast and complex world, while new abilities open doors to explore corners that were previously inaccessible. The combat, for me, is the highlight of the game. From the beginning, Sargon is already a capable warrior, but as you advance, the tools and powers he learns allow more elaborate combinations and a fighting style that mixes speed and unique techniques, making each fight tense and rewarding. The game requires you to master not only the combos, but also the spaces and the right times to react to enemy attacks, creating an intense and immersive rhythm. I really enjoyed this approach because it brings that perfect balance between challenge and satisfaction. You feel the evolution of your character with each victory. The narrative does not get lost in complexities, but it is sufficiently engaging to sustain the adventure. The journey of Sargon, the secrets of the immortals, and the fight against mystical forces are told clearly, with captivating characters and situations that manage to hold me without rambling or confusion. This made me feel as if I was conducting an epic story, but that respects the rhythm of the game and the player's time to discover everything little by little, without haste. Comparing directly with Hollow Knight, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown offers a broader and more robust Metroidvania experience, with detailed graphics and a greater range of abilities right from the start. While Hollow Knight shines for its artistic design and dark atmosphere, Lost Crown focuses on a faster combat structure and a larger world to explore, with less mystery and more action. In my opinion, it is a great option for those who like the Metroidvania style, but seek an adventure that combines challenge with a more cinematic and epic feeling. Overall, what led me to recommend Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is precisely this combination between one of the most iconic action universes with the modern mechanics of Metroidvanias. The game provided me with hours of intense gameplay, great exploration, and battles that remain in memory, making the legacy of Prince of Persia gain a new and strong guise for the current audience. For those who liked Hollow Knight, but want something bigger and with a more refined combat, this is a title that deserves to be on your list. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is a Metroidvania that for many fans of the genre represents the direct spiritual sequel of the classic Castlevania series, especially after the departure of its creator Koji Igarashi. By controlling Miriam, you begin a gigantic journey in a castle full of monsters, secrets, and artifacts in a unique mix of exploration, combat, and customization that reminded me of many hours I spent in Symphony of the Night, but with its own approach, with modern elements that balance challenge and accessibility. The combat in Bloodstained is versatile, allowing the use of a wide variety of weapons, from swords to long-range weapons, and the shards, which grant magical and special abilities. This creates a deep dynamic where you can assemble your preferred playstyle, whether focusing on magic, fast attacks, or brute strength. I found the feeling of mastering the combinations of shards and weapons very rewarding, in addition to the fact that combat requires strategy when facing varied enemies and bosses, which makes it a continuous challenge throughout the adventure. Visually, the game brings a gothic aesthetic in 2.5D that honors its roots, but with graphics that, although pleasant, are not the most impressive by current standards, something that for me did not take away the charm, but may bother those who expect something more modern and showy. The setting of the castle is rich in details and creates that melancholic and dark atmosphere that is the soul of the genre, making exploration engaging and rewarding, even if the story is not as in-depth as that of Hollow Knight. Speaking of progression, Bloodstained offers a vast and interconnected map, with platforming challenges and intelligent enemies, combined with a system of upgrades, equipment, and crafting that enrich the experience, encouraging the player to try different approaches. I was surprised by the amount of extra content, challenging bosses, and multiple endings, which gives a good longevity to the game and makes every minute invested worthwhile. Comparing with Hollow Knight, Bloodstained is more focused on customization, variety of weapons and abilities, and an RPG style that becomes more evident. While Hollow Knight has a more atmospheric and poetic narrative and presentation, Bloodstained is more direct in the story and action, with a difficulty and exploration curve that pleases both veterans and those who are now arriving at the genre. In summary, Bloodstained seemed to me a worthy tribute, and a title that sustains itself very well on its own, with its qualities and challenges. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, for me, is that essential Metroidvania for those who enjoy the style, with a nice balance between tradition and innovation. It may not have the poetry and brutal challenge of Hollow Knight, but it compensates by offering a solid experience, full of gameplay diversity, exploration, and combats that are a lesson for fans of the genre. It's a game that made me like Metroidvania in the right dose, with that pleasant feeling of wanting to go back to explore everything, improve my build, and challenge the most difficult bosses. Metroid Dread is one of the biggest recent successes of the Metroid series, and an experience that those who enjoy Metroidvania cannot miss, even more for those who loved Hollow Knight. It is a game that brings all the fluidity, precision, and challenge of the protagonist Samus Aran in an alien world full of mysteries, where exploration and combat are extremely well balanced. Right in the first hours, I was impressed with the accurate control of the character, who responds perfectly to the commands, which creates a feeling of immersion and almost immediate mastery. The game is known for its robots, the main threats in specific zones of the map, which make the gameplay gain a touch of suspense and tension in moments of pursuit, almost like a stealth game within the Metroidvania, forcing you to hide, assess risks, and flee in calculated jumps. These phases gave a special seasoning to the game, keeping me glued to the control, even when I was under extreme pressure not to be captured. The way the game balances this tension with the feeling of power, by unlocking weapons and abilities to defeat these threats, made the experience very memorable. Metroid Dread is impressive, with 2.5D graphics that combine modernity and respect for the tradition of the franchise, delivering varied, detailed, and animated environments with fluidity. The soundtrack and the setting are another high point, carrying that climate of isolation, discovery, and constant danger that perfectly matches the premise of the game. I really felt that I was immersed in a living and hostile universe, where each area of the planet Zeter has its own surprises and hidden secrets that are worth exploring. In addition, the progression system is classic, with new unlocked abilities that expand the capacity for exploration and combat. This allows you to return to old areas to access new paths, a feeling that I always value in Metroidvanias for the way it encourages continuous exploration and strategic thinking. The structure and design of the phases seemed very well thought out, with challenges and adaptations that never become repetitive, maintaining the rhythm and motivation to advance until the end. Comparing with Hollow Knight, Metroid Dread offers a more accelerated and focused experience on action and speed, with less optional content, but a more direct and intense delivery. While Hollow Knight brings that atmospheric style, more contemplative and with very challenging close combat, Dread combines exploration, ranged combat, and stealth strategies, bringing a gamer hunt approach, which makes you always feel like the hunted and the hunter. For me, both complement each other very well in the genre, offering distinct approaches to what a Metroidvania can be. Metroid Dread was a very pleasant surprise, and an honor for fans of the Metroid franchise and the genre as a whole. The game manages to be both challenging and accessible, modern and classic, and offers an experience that made me really feel the role of a solitary hunter on a foreign planet full of dangers. It is a journey that any Hollow Knight fan should experience to expand their horizons within Metroidvanias. Axiom Verge 2 is a Metroidvania that arrived with the difficult mission of succeeding a cult classic, but managed to create its own identity with innovation and charm. We control Indra, a scientist who finds herself trapped in an alien world divided between two dimensions: the real world and a digital space called Breach. The duality between these worlds forms the core of the game's exploration and challenges, and this mechanic hooked me from the start, as it's as if you have two versions of the map to navigate and solve puzzles. The game maintains the retro feel of the first Axiom Verge, but with more polished graphics and smoother animations, as well as an intriguing design that uniquely blends technology and alien biology. The electronic and atmospheric soundtrack intensifies the immersion and creates that almost hypnotic atmosphere that makes exploring every corner provide hours of fun. This combination reminded me of the taste of classic Metroidvanias, but with a contemporary touch that helps keep it fresh. As for gameplay, the biggest novelty is the role of the drone that accompanies Indra and can be sent to explore the digital world, creating an interesting dynamic between her actions in the physical dimension and what the drone does in the breach. In addition, the the game features a hacking system that allows you to control and manipulate enemies and objects, which adds a strategic layer to combat and exploration. For me, this mechanic elevated the game to another level, because in addition to conventional combat, you need to think about how to use the environment to your advantage. Despite the greater focus on exploration and puzzles, combat has its moments, although less challenging and diverse than in Hollow Knight. The abilities you gain expand your options, but the game is not as punitive, which makes it accessible for those looking to experiment without that constant pressure for extreme precision. The feeling of discovering secrets and unlocking new areas reminded me a lot of the satisfaction I had in other Metroidvanias, even if the pace here is a little more measured. The narrative revolves around the mystery about Indra's past and the world where she is, revealed through memories, documents, and sparse dialogues, which requires good observation to connect all the dots. Although it is not as poetic or symbolic as Hollow Knight's, it creates a fascinating atmosphere that sharpens curiosity and makes you want to unravel everything. The story intertwines with the gameplay, especially with the manipulation of the two worlds, creating a cohesive and engaging experience. Overall, Axiom Verge 2 is a Metroidvania experience that pleased me for its boldness in messing with classic concepts of the genre, bringing innovation without losing the essence. If you like deep immersion, detailed exploration, and thoughtful challenges, it's a great choice. Although it is not as intense in combat as Hollow Knight, it offers a rich and different adventure, which deserves to be on the playlist of any fan who seeks something new within the universe of Metroidvanias. Dead Cells is that Metroidvania that managed to reinvent the genre by adding a roguelike feel that completely hooked me. Unlike traditional Metroidvanias, here each death throws you back to the beginning, with semi-procedural levels that change with each attempt, and the feeling of improving little by little is very addictive. The game focuses a lot on fast, fluid, and technical combat, with a huge variety of weapons, skills, and equipment to build your style, making the experience personalized and full of surprises in each run. The pixel art visual is simple, but very well done, with very fluid animations and a level design that mixes diverse environments and creative enemies that demand different strategies. The soundtrack also caught me, having an electronic feel that gives the right rhythm to the intense action that occurs on the screen. The game is frenetic, but with responsive controls that make it easy to learn and improve, which transforms the difficulty into a fair and rewarding challenge. In gameplay, Dead Cells brings the balance of exploring areas with classic Metroidvania backtracking, along with the renovation brought by the roguelike system, where you lose your immediate progress but guarantee permanent improvements in the base between runs, which kept me motivated to try several times, even in defeats. The mutations and unlocks that can be done outside of the runs give a very pleasant feeling of constant progress. Comparing with Hollow Knight, Dead Cells has a much heavier focus on combat and builds, with progression linked to the skill of the equipment and weapons, while Hollow Knight is more about platforming, deep exploration, and an immersive story with strategic and tense combat. Dead Cells seemed more visceral and accelerated to me, ideal for those who like a more intense rhythm, while Hollow Knight is for those who prefer a mix of challenge with narrative and engaging setting. The structure of the levels in Dead Cells has a touch of randomness, creating different experiences with each play, something that brought a feeling of constant renewal, while Hollow Knight maintains its fixed and extremely detailed world, favoring methodical exploration and map learning. For me, both occupy distinct spaces within the genre, each with its strength. Dead Cells is a mandatory Metroidvania for those who like combat challenges and replayability, with a system that rewards patience, experimentation, and learning. It left me stuck to several game sessions in a row, always wanting to see how far I could get or discover new weapons and mutations. It is an addictive, fluid, and accessible experience, which revolutionized the concept of Metroidvania in my opinion, and that is very worthwhile for fans of Hollow Knight who want something more dynamic and brutal in gameplay.